Hello, this is What It Takes to Lead, a podcast about Mike Sterlacci's faith, family, friendships, and business lessons learned over 40 plus years of selling insurance and building a rapid growth insurance agency in the Dallas-Fort Worth region. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Cooper, and today I'm joined by my co-host and Ansel co-owner and CTO, Leif Hurst, producer Charlie Hooper, special guest and Ansel co-owner and CPO, Tony Smith, and Coverica founder and chairman, and Ansel co-owner and advisor, Mike Sterlacci. Gang, good morning. How's everyone doing? How was your 4th?
PG.
Great.
Doing great. Hey, I always say this at every 4th of July because our 4th of July was yesterday. And not today's July 5th is what I'm saying. But, you know, everybody's got 10 fingers. We're still good. Nobody got blown up yesterday.
All there.
Playing with fireworks. But yeah, we had a great day at the lake. A little sunburn, but you know, it's good. It's good. It's good to be out and be outdoors.
Well, we're finishing up remodeling on the house in Dallas, and so we spent most of the day moving stuff in from the garage and that sort of stuff. And then Chris came over and did a lot of work for me, which is always good. That's why you should have kids.
It's the free labor.
And then we're getting funnier and lazier in our old age. There, Bentry Country Club is one street over. So literally what we'll do is we'll just lazy pick up our chairs and go sit on the driveway and watch the fireworks, which is like being in the audience, and then going home. I don't have to fight traffic, don't have to go anywhere.
And I bet you're not the only one on the street outside either.
Actually, last night we were, because it's only 150 today. So it's kind of hot out there. So, but yeah, we're not, but today we were.
See, we were putting on the fireworks show last night, so that's what we were.
That's why you're counting fingers.
That's why I'm counting fingers. So yeah, it was. I had my nephews, and we had a lot of family stuff over the last couple of years. So anytime I get to hang out with the nephews is awesome. So.
Well, we used to light the black cats and throw them, and you do that until you blow one up near your ear, or it blows up in your hand.
Yeah. So I was showing them
the good old days.
Yeah, I was showing them the joys of M80s. So it was a good time. What about you, Charlie?
Oh, it was good. I went to the Frisco Main Square fireworks show.
Oh, cool.
Oh, very cool.
I don't think it was all that, but the finale was all right.
I was telling Mike as we were walking down, because as there was a couple of fireworks shows going off, and I was looking, I was like, how much of my tax dollars are going to pay for this? And come to find out, it's all of them. But a fireworks show usually runs about $3,000 a minute. And then the grand finale usually runs about $20,000 to $25,000 for that last minute and a half.
Wow.
And so I was sitting there looking at it, and of course, you know, me being the finance economist math guy, I'm like, all right, that's like 115 grand, you know. So anyway,
the public good.
But the kids enjoyed it. Yeah, kids enjoyed it. So.
And Tony, how was Milwaukee? How was yours?
Oh, it was great. Yeah, I'll give you one guess what I was up to.
I bet on a lake.
I was on my local ocean, Lake Michigan, on the boat. Took some friends out, and what did we do after that? We went up to another neighborhood, grilled out, and came back down to my neighborhood for some fireworks. So
nice.
Pretty spot on.
It was so funny. A couple of weeks ago, Tony was talking about going out to the lake, and he's like, "Oh, you know, we're gonna go out to the lake." And I'm sitting there, and I was like, "Oh yeah, we live on a lake in Texas." And then as I'd like hung up the phone, I was like, "Oh no, he means like lake, like big lake."
Yeah, you're on a pond.
Yeah, I'm on a pond compared to him.
Yeah. Well, it was funny. I went back to Madison over the weekend, and this Lake Mendota and Lake Monona. So Madison is located on an isthmus between two lakes. And we went to our favorite place. We're looking at the lake, and I just looked out, and I was like, man, I remember this thing being a lot bigger when I was a kid.
That's funny.
After being in front of Lake Michigan now, it's like, oh man, this is
I was like, your lake may have waves.
Yeah. Tides.
Well, shall we get started? So if, for our loyal listeners, you probably know where we like to start. And generally that's with the why. So Mike, I'm gonna start it with you, and then we'll kind of open it up to the rest of the table. Why Ansel?
That's a pretty big question. It became obvious that the direction of Coverica retail needed to become more of a concierge, stable, high touch model. And I'll answer any questions you have. But technology, and certainly now with the advent of AI really getting to where it's so involved in our everyday lives, there becomes a chasm and a lot of friction. So what became apparent to me was that to split the two companies up so that Ansel could be able to operate in a way that it would benefit other agencies, and which is the second precept. But then also let Coverica, instead of having to buy the gas station, just get the gas from Ansel. So, as a visionary or a leader, a role that you have is look for opportunities to grow and help make money for the people involved in the process. And if you hold back a company that could serve more purposes, it's a mistake. So I think it's a short-term mistake. So if you look at the companies, and I'm oversimplifying it, but if you look at the companies that were doing real well, so take Sears, a 100-year-old company, they were in the position with their catalogs and everything else where they could have done what Bezos did, but they chose not to. And they stuck with the old model. Every model has a shelf life. We as leaders have shelf lives. So a big push that is a segue to the rest of the conversation is that a really good leader recognizes that they have numbered days, and they better be preparing for subsequent generations to take up and run with it. That's the whole concept, really, of why do we have kids. We have kids not just to be loved, but we have kids so that when we're old and decrepit, you got somebody that really knows you and cares about you because you have a history with them. So anyway, so Ansel was once the talent was there, which of course was you, Garrett, and also Leif, and having worked with Leif for 20 years and now Charlie. Looking at it totally objectively, it would be tying down the company to keep it just working exclusively in and for Coverica. And of course, meeting Tony, same thing. So by coming up with a plan that would be the second precept, where it's everybody's best sustainable interest, we can all still eat at the same table. It's just a much bigger table.
And that was the thing, is like over the last 20 years, I've gone to conferences and kind of shown things that we've built or things that we've done, and I mean, I've had just countless people walk up to me and say, "Can you help us do that?" And it just never felt above board doing it behind Coverica's back or as an employee of Coverica. It's like we needed legitimacy and separation, and I think that's what Ansel gets us.
That's true, and it really goes all the way back to when I was a captive agent. I was interviewing a young lady earlier today who has been with one of the captive carriers for many years, and just sharing with her the opportunity that was available to her if she expands. But she would have to leave the captive to be able to do that. So it's always, when we get something right, it's always easy to look, well, we should have seen it earlier. Well, when you're in the thick of it, you don't necessarily see it because, and another point, Leif, I didn't know where you were going with that, but we've had people over the years say that we're so much further ahead than most agencies, certainly the smaller agencies. And we've always looked at how can we improve? But the point being that figuring out how to create a company, which is now Ansel, is coming on the back of a proven model as opposed to starting from scratch. A lot of the techies that would come in and talk to us, and I won't mention any names, but they have a great idea of but it's not really indexed to what we actually do. And so what you guys have the ability of is not only having come through Coverica, but you now can see how it would help other agencies, and you have a poster child to say, look over here, this is what we did there.
Right. Yeah. And that's what we've been doing. I mean, what's been so neat about it is of the calls of people that are reaching out to us, Garrett, you've picked up on this. The first kind of comment that we usually get back is, wow, y'all actually really understand what we do.
Yeah.
It's just like, I was born into this. Like, it's like
you've served 20 years in this.
Yeah. It's so it's neat to finally be able, and the other thing is, it's also, I mean, it's a learning experience too, to see like, oh, hey, this is how other agencies do this.
Yes.
And and that's where I
Mhm.
feel like we can go back and we can serve all of our clients of like, oh, hey, well, this is something cool that this agency is doing. This is an approach that they took. I mean, I talked to an agency that um, there's almost no people there, and their whole thing is a technology back end. And it was just
Mhm.
like, oh, hey, that counts too. That's something that they can do. That's another way of doing it.
Yeah.
Talk to another one that's basically a bank that does insurance as a side product, and we've met some of those folks before, but it's just so interesting to see how many companies buy technology and they just don't fully use it. I mean, there was a conversation I was having with Garrett earlier to where it's like, hey, these people, they bought a Ferrari and they keep it in the garage. It's just
Yeah.
like, let's stretch the legs out a little bit. Like, you don't know what you're sitting on here.
And
So,
so, Leif, to follow on your point, I mean, I think there's, one of the things that I see the opportunity we have, right? And Mike, I think this goes back to your vision is, with a lot of this stuff kind of emerging, right? And I'll sort of, I'm sure at some point I'll get into some of the stuff later today about opportunities and sort of the vision for Ansel, but there really needs to be some best practices laid down, right? And I think it's been suggested, right? And Salesforce has put some kind of white papers out there and a little bit of guidance. But back to something you just said a moment ago, is most of these technology folks don't have the insurance expertise that you have, that
mhm,
Mike has, that other people at Coverica have. So they're building these various sort of plain Jane applications. And you and I have heard firsthand, right? The frustration with the insurance agencies and the agents are this doesn't really do exactly what we need it done, right? And so I think, I see Ansel as also having this potential to really be a thought leader in the space and drive
mhm.
forward like, hey, these are the practices you should be doing if you really want to do this right, with Salesforce implementation and kind of scaling it.
I think one thing that I want to make sure that I'm interjecting here, which is the fear factor. Fear is the greatest motivator of all, and you will find that a lot of people that are running successful agencies, they're recognizing what they don't know, and the technology is really hitting them across the head with it. When I listen to it being a part of Ansel, when you guys are talking, there's a lot of it that is um, beyond my ability to understand, because I hold on to the past. Like the bell curve, early adopters, late adopters. It's because I'm very comfortable in my own skin that I'm not threatened by it. But I know a lot of business owners, uh, after they become successful, and they don't want to change because what made them successful is now being changed.
Mhm.
And so you have an added situation that you guys may not pick up on because you're very comfortable in technology. This came to roost with me. I remember when Yurka, who is Heidi's, I guess he would be my nephew too by marriage. Anyway, he had programmed for these apartments to where you wouldn't have to talk to anybody. You could just physically go there, get in at the kiosks, and go see the units and do everything totally without talking to a human being.
The house next door to me is for sale that way.
There you go.
There's no realtor.
There you go. And
Open
so
door.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah.
probably open
It's
door.
a
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's a approaching $1 million listing.
yeah, it's so
Mhm.
this is a new technology that people my age or older people can't relate to. So Yurka was asking me, at what point in the process of going to look at this apartment would you have dropped off? I said the parking lot, and that was, and I don't, I'm not trying to say to be funny here, but the point was is what the software was telling us where to go and where to park wasn't correct. And so I don't need this aggravation. I'm not, but conversely, to Samantha, it was like a scavenger hunt.
Mhm.
And that therein is the difference between younger generations who are born into technology or very comfortable with technology and older people. Now, I say this because for Ansel to do as well as it can do, we have to make certain that Well, the fact that you've got me involved in the company will say, well, there's an old guy here, so he can relate with me. And that's the problem I have with a lot of these techies that have come into Coverica over the years. It's like, you really don't know what you're talking about to the young people that are the technology people, because they're coming up with products that, like, for example, with insurance, you got capacity issues.
Mm-hmm.
You've got zip code issues that the carriers are not going to share. I mean, they're afraid that somebody's going to say they're redlining. But that's not that at all. They're just saying that the underwriting profitability, like, for example, in Houston, used to be they'd have to have like an 80% profit model that they would write to, because every time a hurricane comes through, they'll lose 10 years of profit. Well, that doesn't exist in Dallas, although Dallas is far worse than Des Moines, Iowa.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just saying that there are parts of the nuances, to your point about insurance, that you only know by living in it, working in it, and understanding it. So when you bring in technology advances, it may miss the mark.
Well, there's a lot of solutions looking for a problem
Yeah,
instead of
that's an excellent way to say it.
instead of the other way of like, hey, we've got a problem, this is how we fix it. And the other thing is, I think the timing of things, and this is the part where I scare the audience a little bit. The next 5 years, I think, are going to be a condensed version of the last 20. And
That's a true statement.
with AI coming and I mean, AI already here. And every conference I sit in, every meeting I sit in about AI, the thing comes up. I just sat through one with Salesforce to where it was this thing called intelligent document processing. And you scan it in and it figures out what the page is. And, you look at it and it's like, okay, well, that's OCR. That's been around for 20, 25 years. And then they submitted doctor's handwriting and it figured out what everything was, because it had built a learning model based on how doctors handwrite. And the comment that was said is, it's slightly better today than a human. Or the other comment is, well, this is the dumbest it will ever be. Tomorrow it'll be smarter. Which means, every day this thing gets, and I wouldn't even say it's incrementally better. It's like every day this thing gets twice as good.
Well, the pushback to that is a reliance on synthetic reality, and it's leaving out people.
Mm-hmm.
It's how do we harness it to the advantage and still keep people involved in it? Because ultimately, I will tell you, and I didn't understand this till I was much older, but these menial jobs out there that could evaporate because of technology is putting people on the country dole.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah.
In other words, this better, faster, cheaper, there is a point at which it has a diminishing or diminutive effect. It's not good. You need to have, like, if you look at, for example, the farmers. I've heard this once. I've heard it a million times. When people go over to France, they're always how good the food is. Well, that's because they don't have farmers that are building their farms to feed 3,000, 8,000 people. It is literally the farm across the street or down the road that's bringing the food, and the chefs will cook what's fresh and what's there. So John Sutter was mentioning that his great-granddaughter, her diabetes was improving when she was in Europe because the food wasn't as processed and stuff. Well, okay, so is the goal to have fewer and fewer farmers that can feed millions and more people because of technology advances? Or can you get the same quality that you could from somebody manually doing it across the street? So those are the things that people really don't want to discuss, because it is the marriage of the two. How do we take technology to make the quality of life better? Not because we can synthesize things. And also, too, I guess it's the yin-yang of life. So teachers are now figuring out how to get software to recognize whether this is AI generated or if it's done in,
Mm-hmm.
So you're having the counter. So as technology improves things, there's also going to be more avenues to where it can be, I don't want to be negative and say destructive, but
Exploited.
It's yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that's the thing is, I mean, there's a lot of talk now about, it's like, okay, well, hey, people will get follow their passions more and things like that. But it's like, hey, at the end of the day, you got to pay your rent.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. If you go back now, this is again because you got an old guy in the room. I used to see commercials where they would talk about with washers and dryers and dishwashers and how it would free people up to have more time with their family. Well, no, we have less time with family today than we have ever had. So now wait a minute, manual labor, and we didn't have all these advances. We had more family units, people were closer, you had neighbors. Now that's virtually gone. So so this is a debate I have with Glenn Campbell all the time. He says things have improved, and I said it depends on how you want to measure it. If you're measuring it on marriages, I mean, a lot of kids don't want to have kids. So we have a regressing population. So where's the improvement here? We go crazy over Tesla because it's electric cars, but what are the effects on other issues? I mean, we get to where we're blocking out things and we're not seeing the whole. But to the extent that technology can help us have more quality lives, that's the game. But what people use it for is eliminating jobs. And what
Yeah.
happens to those people? Where do they make a living?
Well, and to me, that's always been a focus is like, let's get rid of let's figure out a way to automate the bottom work and focus more on the top work. And the top work may be more client interactions,
Yeah, that's right,
more
relationship.
human interactions.
That's exactly what we tell our staff here is that when we're hiring Filipinos or adding technology, it is not to, although some of our contemporaries use it to not hire people or to fire people or whatever. But what we're saying is now you can up your game. You can now manage people in the Philippines that can help you do more work. So instead of handling a 200,000 revenue, you can now handle 400,000 revenue, and you're overseeing it. So it's literally pushing you up to where you can be more relational.
Mhm.
Because at the end of the day, the survival of Coverica retail is as it becomes a concierge model to where it can have the time to talk to people. I mean, imagine here's where AI and technology is great. So that if a doctor has instantaneous information that they can sit down with a patient and say, well, let me help you understand this. As opposed to where it is pretty much right now to where, you get 15 minutes and that's all you get.
For Ansel's why, I mean, back to the original question is it's to build technology tools to make people more efficient in the industry
And effective.
and effective. And that way we are able the things that can't be automated away yet
Or shouldn't be.
or shouldn't be, that people have more time to do that.
That's right.
I mean, and if I were to just, I don't know any producers that love filling out accord forms, as an example.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like, let's figure out how to get that either moved or automated.
And Leif, I think that's actually a great segue to the guy who actually built a product, right? Who helped us kind of mastermind and build that product for those producers to fill out
That's
those
where
support
yep,
forms.
that's
So Tony, obviously you obsess on the problems quite a bit. Maybe for our audience, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, how you're a CPO. For the uninitiated, what is a CPO? And maybe just talk a little bit about how you've built technology in the industry before.
Sure. Yeah, well, as the CPO, I'm like you said, I'm focused on the problems. I at times I feel, it's almost acting as a therapist slash scientist slash artist, kind of, this amalgamation of listening to the problems that people have day to day, understanding the ways that they perceive the effects on their job and those around them, and kind of working to really identify if that's true, if that understanding is true, and if and how it relates to the business's effectiveness, or their ability to get the important work done, and really work to translate those issues into potential new solutions, novel solutions, simple solutions. um, we're Ansel is not in business to make complex solutions out of simple problems. We want to find a simple way to solve things for people that allow them to get their work done, so that it feels that they feel a bit more they feel more fulfilled in the work that they're doing. And I think that's it's an interesting position to be in, as as a CPO. The part that you mentioned, the certificates module, it's like you said, the Accord forms and everything. It's not an enjoyable part of their day to sit and fill out Accord form after Accord form and then duplicate it and then fill it out in this platform and that one and not have all the resources available to them in an efficient way to get that work done. So, a lot of the problems that our users, the people who were doing this work day to day, brought up were the issues and the pains were all valid, but the potential ideas that everybody had to solve it needed to be explored and talked about and kind of prototyped and like, is this really where we want to go, or is maybe this where we want to go, and leave this space open to to discuss those ideas and find out really what's best for everybody.
I was going to say something that I thought was so interesting when I first kind of got involved with the concept of a product officer is how big of an impact the word empathy is in your job. I mean, it really is. I mean, can you expand on that a little bit?
I always knew that it was an important part of what I do. Going back to before I was, working in this space, the broad history was that I was a musician for years. I got into design and website development, and that was my first kind of foray into tech. And I'd always noticed that the good work that I was getting done was when I was really listening, and that was that's the exact same thing that a good musician should say. When you're listening and not trying to step over everybody and play your part, do this and that, you're listening to what everybody else is doing and you're trying to make the whole sound better. So that, I think with technology and as you mentioned, empathy in this role that I have now and what we do, that came from educating myself in design thinking, which is a process to approach and solve complex issues, essentially. And it's kind of an iterative process. It's a non-linear process, but it's really interesting. It starts with empathy. It moves on to defining a problem, moves on to ideating solutions, prototyping a testable solution, and then building and delivering and getting feedback. So the interesting thing about it is that, as I said, it's not necessarily always going to be linear. You may get to a point where you're prototyping something and you understand based on feedback from people that you really didn't get to the root of the problem yet. And if you take a couple steps back, that means the ideas that you were brainstorming about weren't based on the right problem. And now you're like, well, wait, did I not understand the problem? So you got to go back to empathy again. You got to go back to really download the issues and internalize them and make them make them part of you before getting back through that process. And it's a little bit of a web, it's an interesting way of approaching these problems, but I think it's effective.
And that's something, I mean, as far as me on the development side, like when we get to a point to where you as a product officer are telling us like, build this, like it needs to do this. There's been a lot of times where it's just like, well, I thought we were building this other thing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, no. Because once we find out that what we're going to build and we see a prototype and that prototype is what we're going to build, and we found out that prototype, through the prototyping process, that thing doesn't actually solve the first thing that we thought we were wanting to solve. It's cheap to change when it's a prototype.
Yeah.
It's difficult to change once you've, hey, look at this thing I made. And they're, the client is like, no. Like, I wanted it to do this other thing.
Yeah. Once you're mass producing the cars, it's a real expensive, right? To set up the assembly line and you're ripping off those axles. And then once you're getting the feedback from the public, hey, this car is kind of a dog, right? Ford, you kind of missed the boat on this.
The YOLO Sony Walkman, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Sony Walkman for sure. Yeah. And that's the thing is like it's the car is easy to change when it's just clay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a much easier thing to digest and say like, hey, this is what we built. Is this right? Before we start spending some real money on it.
Well, and the most valuable part of in that at that point, you, the developer, the company, whoever's building this thing may assume that the most valuable part at that stage is to get the thing 100% built, whereas sometimes it's to confirm or deny what if that clay thing looks like the right thing or if it's solving the right problem, and I think
Right.
that information, it's so valuable getting that feedback and input.
And Tony, you and I have worked together now 6-7 years. So, sometimes you're literally finishing my sentences and vice versa, right? When it comes to building software. So you and I know what is in terms of building the empathy, what's the first question we always ask ourselves? Because this gets right back to Mike's whole ethos. What's the first thing we always ask?
Well, I mean, it's always why.
Why? Right?
Yeah.
Why are we trying to solve this problem? Or why, and Mike, I mean, that's where you start.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I was thinking about how to kind of introduce the a concept that this is going to be probably like when we have our first meeting as a business owners. There is a dimension, and I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it best, but very often the people that you will be serving will be off in what it is that they want, that they really believe
Mhm.
is what they need. And you can see that it will help them, but it's not the big issue. There is the thought that comes to mind that I forgot who told me this concept, but during the war, and you've heard this before, Garrett. I know I've said it to you before, and I may have said it to you guys. When you had the French, when they fell to Hitler, and you had Churchill saying, you need to turn to the admiral in the French fleet. You need to turn your ships over to England, or we'll have to sink them. And very sobering. And of course, the Frenchman was very proud and says, well, I'm not going to turn over my ships. And so Churchill was in a position where he had to start sinking them. So the question is, who's at fault? Okay? And give you a pause for a second. I have never had anybody get this answer right. But it's actually Hitler. Hitler's the one that's at fault.
Mm-hmm.
So where I'm going with this is you'll have people, business owners, that going into the future will be, this is really what we need. And you can look at it and say, yeah, that can really help you. But over time, what I'd like to see, the acumen, business acumen being developed is a bigger picture of, yeah, that's part of it, but that's there. There's a we went and saw a play in when we were in Florida. It was Mary Poppins, and so why reach for stars when you can reach for the heavens? Which, of course, the stars would be included in the heavens. So if I'm making any sense at all, it's a little bit more probative and a little bit deeper. It's a deeper why.
I want to teach Mike jobs to be done framework.
Yeah, maybe we'll do that at the annual meeting.
Yeah. This was just making me think. I 100% agree. I've seen it more often than not that the solution or something that is proposed by the stakeholder, to I mean, I can see the way that this solution might solve a problem, but is it the only one? And to not marry yourself to that, and again, I mean, to die to self, to not say, well, this is my solution, this is it. I can be wrong, you could be wrong, and that's fine. But the thing that all of this made me think about was you're not looking for a hammer and a nail, you're looking to hang a picture on a wall.
Right.
Like
That's
if
jobs to
you
be
want
done framework.
yeah, you want the outcome, and I think that's an important thing, is that we want to stay outcome oriented, outcome focused. Not, if the outcome is a hammer and a nail, okay, great, we'll get you a hammer and a nail, but let's just make sure that we understand you're looking to hang a picture on the wall, right? So that's I love that you brought that up. It's I mean, I don't want to say fun, but I'm gonna say fun part of the job is trying to figure out those navigate
Well,
those issues.
okay. Well, then I'll give you the deeper why. Why are you hanging the picture on the wall is to make a feeling for that whole room,
Right.
for the whole
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that it's reaching this whole thing with we just remodeled the house, and I purposefully, and you guys know I love Heidi. I purposefully didn't tell her how big of a deal it was going to be. I try because I know her too well. I said, look, we're not doing anything structural. So it's not going to be as complicated. Well, that's the abyss that I live in. I'm going to be honest. I'm going to tell her the truth, but I'm not. I said this years ago about being married to Heidi. Son Michael, when he got married, and he was already married, and nobody knew about it, and he finally told me, and he said, Dad, you can't tell Heidi. And I said, what do you mean I can't tell Heidi? Anyway, long story to it, but essentially I said to him, and it's still true today, I said, I know my wife well enough to where I can distract her to where she'll never ask the question that I don't want to answer. I says, now often I have to throw myself under the bus.
It's nothing structural.
But it's nothing structural, honey. Listen, trust me. And then of course, now we're in like week 14 on the thing, and we're now finally bringing stuff back into the house. And she'll, like last night, she was on me saying, I can't believe the dust on this mirror that we have, and it's going to take me hours to clean it. And I just smile and I say, I'm sorry, honey. I love you, and get out of the room as quick as I can.
There you go. Exit stage left.
Well,
That's funny.
I want to come back though, Mike. I want to come back to what you just said about why are you hanging the picture in the first place? So one of the things, and I'm going to ask you to kind of retell that Musk story, that bit that you shared with me about the rockets and breaking that cost down. But one of the things that we try to do is this thing called 5 whys, which is a design technique. Tony's done it umpteen times. And the idea is it's to uncover what you just said, right? Like, why are you hanging this thing in the first place? Right. So it's like, you think you have the answer. Like, why are you doing this? Well, because I needed a hammer and a nail. Okay. Well, why do you need a hammer and nail? Well, because I'm trying to hang this picture. Okay. Well, then why are you trying to hang this picture? And eventually you get to sort of the root cause, which is also what Elon Musk, that's how he thinks. He's always trying to get to the root cause. And I know you shared with me a great story recently that I was unaware of when he was sort of sat down, the rocket engineer, and was like, I've got this question. How do we figure out the cost of this thing? I mean, I know.
Oh yeah. You know, there's 2 things about Musk that just fascinated me, and I didn't know which one you were referring to. I believe the one you're referring to is the idiot metrics, I think is what he calls it.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
And so, and of course, my memory isn't as sharp as it used to be, and I can't remember what the guy's name was, but he was the CEO of the company. And so Elon said to him, how much, we need to reduce the cost of these rockets substantially. And so the guy's listening, and he could tell him all the information that he knew. And he says, what is the cost of the raw material for this whatever piece it was? He says, I don't know. And he says, if you don't know the next time we meet, then I'll accept your resignation. This is kind of Elon Musk Management 101. And so he said, okay, the material for this that we pay like $13,000, if memory serves me correct, for this piece, the raw material is like $100. So Elon is saying, if you pay more than twice the cost of the material, you're an idiot. I mean, that's the idiot metrics. Mm-hmm. And if you're paying $13,000, something to that effect, I know I'm butchering it up, but that is why the cost and the effectiveness and efficiency was so dramatically addressed, was because he really cut to let's look at it from what the cost is of the material, not what they're charging. So I thought that's where you want. Is that where?
Yeah, and that's and like he got there because he kept going deeper, right? He kept going deeper with that person, right? That person was just thinking, well, here's the retail cost of the rocket. He's like, well, okay, but let's break that down. Like, what are the materials in it, right?
Now, where I thought you were going, which is also potentially applicable, I wondered, what is the big deal between Bezos and Elon wanting to send rockets? Do y'all know why he's doing it?
Colonize Mars, right?
That's exactly right. But
Yeah.
why?
It's a life insurance policy on the human species.
That's exactly right. He is thinking I listened to him being, he was just talking about it, saying that, of course, the guy's scary brilliant. He's thinking that there probably has been other Earths in the history of mankind, but they died off. And so by colonizing Mars, potentially in the future, and he even admits, I'm not going to live to see it, but the fact is that way we won't become extinct. So that's his why, and I never understood it. You could say, well, it's a way to make money. And depending on where you are in the evolution chain, you're going to look at Musk and what he does from different vantage points. All of this to circle back to the challenges you're going to have with technology for Ansel is making certain that, one, is not just efficiency, it's effectiveness. And is it really going to help them get what it is that they want? And then we can get real provocative in that you may not want to work with somebody once you know what they're really wanting to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So be open to that too. I mean, I don't know that I want to be helping Hitler come up with the atomic bomb.
Yeah, I mean, and Mike, I want to talk a little bit about, we sort of talked about why Ansel in the first place, right? But I want to get more at kind of your why, behind the company. You've often talked about sort of at this place in your life. I know you sort of always kind of affectionately talk about it being on the back nine, right? I like to think you're on hole like 10, right? You're not on 16 or 17. You're on 10, let's say. But whatever, we'll say you are on the back nine. I know that to be factually the case. But that one of your whys, one of your purposes, is to help kind of foster this next generation of leaders. And I just, obviously, we are the humble recipients of that. I think it's probably,
well, you're the beneficiaries of it. Beneficiaries, just like I was. Okay, so and you were. It was brilliant that you set it up to where I could even have a conversation with Jeff Van Duzer, the author of the book Why Business Matters to God and What Still Needs to Be Changed. I've said this jokingly before, and I said it earlier today to a young lady I was talking to, about when people are in their deathbed or they know they're going to die, they're never thinking about, gee, I sure wish I had that plane or that Bentley, or I wish, they're going to say, I wish I'd spent more time with the people that loved me, that I loved, and people that I cared about. Well, it's that tension between making a living and driving and building and providing for oneself, and then also what is truly sustains us, what is truly of value. And at 70, I have a lot of friends that are dying off. A lot of friends that have lost spouses, a lot of people that have terminal diseases. And as you get older, you get more and more aware of that. And then the first tragedy that hit me was, when I lose somebody that's been a friend for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, you don't have the time to replace those people. Okay, now, just for a second, let's say, okay, so then I have enough financial wherewithal to live comfortably. So now what? There's a book called So Then How Do We Live? So we have friends or have children to be loved. We have friends and we play sports and we do things to get a sense of community and being with other people. So with looking at other people and then saying, okay, how can I help this person? And at the same time, the second precept, help myself. I've said this, and this is another provocative statement. If it wasn't for eternal salvation, this being a Christian stuff is a bunch of crap. I'm just telling you, it's hard. It's real hard to be a disciple, right? So why would you do it? It's because there's a payoff. I mean, if somebody tells you there's no payoff in being, and then you say, "Wait a minute, you're a phony."
Well, there's no. Our pastor a couple of weeks ago, something to the effect of like, there's no selflessness in the animal kingdom outside of human beings.
Yeah, it's survival of the fittest.
Right.
You got to have a reason to do things. Okay, so now what I have discovered, I kind of stumbled onto it early on. When I decided to step up and buy the agency from the prior owners, I realized that if I could help producers make more money being a part of what was back in those days Sovereign, or actually Maxim in the very beginning, they're not going to leave. And if I can leverage that to get a bunch of people in here selling insurance, then eventually I'll make more money. Okay? Well, then that opens up the whole concept of leveraging, of how to grow different enterprises. And so I've always understood that, not always. Back in those days, I was discovering it. But once I understood it, I said, you can do really well by diversification and by leveraging. So if I can help somebody do better financially, there's a good chance it's going to benefit me financially. I just can't be the first one to be fed. And therein lies the problem with a lot of business entrepreneurs, is they've worked so hard to build their business that somewhere along the road they forget why they did it. They did it to have a better quality of life and have more control of their life. Well, why wouldn't they want to impart that and help other people realize that? And oh, by the way, make money themselves for doing it. So I'm saying all this because, one, at my age, being able to help younger people does what? You get an old dog and a young dog together, what does it do to the old dog? The old dog's got more energy.
Yeah.
So I love business, and I love this process, and that's what you and I first found that we had in common, Garrett, is that business is this is funny with Chris. So Chris used to complain all the time because I'm always talking business. And Andy even said that when my ex-daughter-in-law was working in accounting. She says, Mike has all these expenses, are they business related? And he looked at her and he says, Abby, have you ever seen Mike not talk about business?
No.
Ever?
No.
Anywhere? Anyway, so Chris used to come when we'd have like the Blue Bloods to try and get the kids together, and we'd have like dinner on Sunday night and everything. And Chris would get so, can we stop talking business, Dad? Can we just stop talking about okay. Well, now that he's an owner and the majority owner in the company, guess what?
Yeah, it doesn't turn off.
It doesn't turn off. He's always talking about it. And what I'm enjoying seeing, and this is the point, I'm enjoying seeing him mature and becoming so much more almost philosophical about life. And he's looking at things and saying, there's always going to be friction. There's always going to be problems. And you solve one, it's going to be replaced by the next one. So seeing him mature and seeing others mature while doing work that's pleasing to God, that's pleasing to themselves, that's helping other people, that is really cool. And so to the extent that I can impart that to other contemporaries of mine, I love that. I love that. And it's like a light bulb goes off in their head. They say they never looked at it that way. So did that answer your question?
Yeah. That was, I feel like I got more than I bargained for.
Yeah. And something that I've noticed just as a viewer of you, Mike, is you tend to operate from a point of view of, this doesn't have to be, we don't have to operate from a position of famine, meaning for me to win, everybody else has to lose.
Right.
There's a lot of people that can win along the way with us.
That's right.
And maybe we're not scoring 90-0 and spiking the ball at the end, but there's a lot of people that got to play along the way and got to contribute.
Well, and the other part of that, and this is the point that I bring up age a lot, and I know I frustrate people my age when I talk about age a lot. The fact is what they don't understand is that when you have people liking you, admiring you, caring about you, that is so much more important than money.
No. And to follow up on Garrett's question, for young professionals that are listening to this, I'm 44, Garrett's 44, Tony's in his, you're what,
36?
No, he turned 45.
Technically 45, Leif.
Oh,
I hate
goodness.
to pull rank on you, but
there you go. Yeah, I'm 6 months behind you. So
yeah.
I still get to claim 70s baby by 4 days.
Ooh.
There you go.
My kids remind me all the time. But even for Charlie's generation, people that are listening to this and they have aspirations to one day open and run their own business. How do you go about finding their Mike Sterlacci?
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going with that. let me go back.
Yeah, how did you find your Mike Sterlacci, Mike?
Well,
Maybe that's a good place to start.
I never did.
Right. Yeah.
So I would say that I remember going way back that I knew that I needed to learn certain skills that I would see demonstrated with certain people.
Mm-hmm.
So back when I worked at Century 100 years ago, it occurred to me that, I got to go on a trip that the company sponsored. You do these things and you get to go on a trip. So I went on the trip and I noticed that the old guys that make a lot of money never go on trips.
Yeah.
They never win awards. And I said, there's something here that I'm not seeing. So I would talk to them. They didn't want to talk to me, they'd get away. So I had to put on the helmet and endure their BS. Because this is back long before political correctness was even invented. So I realized two things. One is that I need to learn from these people because they know something I don't know. And they don't want to give you that information, by the way, because they just see you as a young punk that's not going to make it. You guys aren't going to make it. Why waste the time working with you young people? You're not going to make it. But the other thing I figured out is that they knew something and I needed to know it. And listen, they were not very polite and friendly. One in particular was saying, well, I've lost more business than you've written. And I said, is that something to be proud of? Because I've always been comfortable in my own skin. That's a whole nother story. But so what I did, because I couldn't find anybody like me that genuinely was invested in a person's success and would be open and honest with, hey, let me tell you how I'm going to make money on this too by your success. But finding people that are doing something that you want to be able to do and not take it personal when they upset you, frustrate you, or whatever, because your point is learning what it is they do and how they do it. And then once you got it, you can cut them loose. I mean, Ralph, who we've had on a podcast before, used to get mad at me because I would ask him advice on stuff and then I wouldn't do it. He said, why are you asking me advice? Because you don't. I said, Ralph, I need to have your perspective.
I'm still manning my argument.
Yeah. So anyway, so I would encourage young people to not be politically correct, to just say, okay, this person knows how to do this. And if they really do know how to do that, just go learn from them, figure out what it's going to take for them to even give you information. I'll play this out. I remember when I was in the position to take over the agency. So CNA had a course that they were teaching how to pay producers, how to compensate producers. So I go to this class, and there are two people that are tremendously successful business. One was Doug Hotchkiss, and the other one was Arvid Leek, who ran Legacy, which, anyway. So I started picking their brains. Well, they were not wanting to be friendly with me. I'm a competitor. And I remember Doug Hotchkiss looks at me, he says, Mike, he said, you're really putting me in an awkward position. You're asking me questions, and I really don't want to help you because you're a competitor. Now, why is that important, and why do I bring up Doug? Because years later, one of our producers wanted to sell a product that they had exclusive rights to. So I called up Doug. He's now retired. I called him up and I said, is there any way that we can rep your product? He says, Mike, it's a closed piece of business, but for you, we'll figure out a way to do it. See, this is the importance of treating people with respect, even when they're dumping on you. Because if you act to them the way they're acting to you, there's no chance that they'll ever come around. They're going to feel justified in being a jerk.
Yeah, and the other thing is I'd encourage our audience to go back and listen to the Friends of Virtue episodes, because I do think whenever you're looking for a mentor, it's almost like a friend of virtue that's also business minded, because it's somebody that you can be real with. It's somebody that you can, open up to.
That's good. That's a good segue too. And I would also say, the being good at business is important, but what's really important is that they're going to tell you where you're screwing up. I remember with son Michael, he was real frustrated with his girlfriend, with her parents, the girlfriend's parents, all that, and he's just listing how everybody else is wrong. And I said, okay, Mike, I got a question for you. Are you acting in a way that is something you can be proud of? What are you doing? And then you could see the energy go out of him, and he says, well, I'm not doing right either.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't have to know all of the intricacies of what's going on. What I'm doing is looking at the person. So I would say critical on a friend of virtue is somebody that knows you and who you are. And when they see that you're going a direction that is not really in your best interest, will say, have you thought about this? As opposed to I mean, it's not, none of this is easy. It's easy for me to say it, but none of it's really easy. I have friends, one of the master agents said to me recently, he says, we had a motivational speaker, and he said that, pick the 5 people that help build you and make you who you are today. And he came by me later and said, Mike, you're one of those 5.
Mm.
Now, that's really powerful. But the point is that I genuinely, when I brought him into we created a master agency in California, and he bought me out subsequently to it. And I didn't want to sell, but circumstances were that he bought me out of it. So I pretty much moved on. But because of handling things with integrity and doing it, as kindly as you can, even in a business situation that's dissolving, years later, he would come back and say something like that. So friends of virtue are absolutely critical. And I would say to people, work on friends of virtue. The rest of them, pleasure and use, they're going to be there no matter what. It's the friends of virtue that are hard to get.
Yeah. And Mike, I want to add something you said, because, I feel fortunate that, you and I have a friendship of virtue relationship. And, one of the things that you mentioned to me was, hey, don't kind of waffle on this stuff. Like, if you want to be a friend of virtue of somebody, approach them and say, look, this is the kind of relationship I'd like to have with you. Right. So I think back to your question, Leif, about how do you find a mentor? You go to someone and say, I want you to mentor me. Right. I want to be your mentee. I want to learn from you. What do I need to do to make this happen? Right. As somebody who wants to learn. And Mike, I know that was a big thing for you, is you sought out experts. I mean, you kind of just, talked about that.
And I've been turned down too. I mean, I said, no, Mike, you're going to wear me out. I don't want that. So, okay, that's fine. We're still good friends. And we are friends of virtue, just not that as much time entered into it. Listen, there are so many things that work in your head that over time you begin to realize they're just distractions, or Zig Ziglar used to call it stinking thinking.
Mm-hmm.
A friend of mine of like over 50 years now, I reached out to him because I hadn't heard from him in a long time. Well, I found out that her husband's got cancer now, and about a year prior had a heart attack. And so, I'm thinking, well, why am I not hearing from them? And, maybe the phase of our relationship is over, or, the seasons of this, that, and the other stuff. And so finally, I just kind of listened to that voice and said, I'm going to go ahead and call. And, when I heard that, it just struck me, because I said earlier, the mortality of life. And I said, I don't want to interrupt. And she's literally in the hospital where he's having a treatment. So,
Wow.
and she says, no, I'm talking to you because I want to talk to you. So there are so many things that will happen in your lives as you live your life that you'll realize years later how important it was. And I think a responsibility of those of us that really want to be disciples will take the time to say, look, here's some things that I learned that maybe mean nothing to you today, but someday they might. So again, friendship of virtue. My sister Annette was mad at me. She says, now that you've told me, I wish you'd never told me about friends of virtue, because I realize I don't have any. And I said, well, then work on it.
Yeah. Now you know what the next year should be focused on.
And that's why you said, don't be bold and say, hey, look, I'm looking for a friendship of virtue or a mentor. Would you be that? And then, be ready for them to say, well, here's where you're screwing up. Here's what you did. This was really dumb what you just did. Let's kind of talk about why did you do that? Well, because I was mad. Well, okay. How's that working for you?
Yeah, I'll say my circle of friends have significantly improved since I started adopting the friendship of virtue kind of
Wonderful.
mindset. Honestly, just like the friends that I have, for the last year since I've learned this, model, uh, really great. So
And that,
yeah,
what's great about hearing that from you, Charlie, is that something that I was taught is passing on to the next generation. Because I learned this from some people that cared enough about me to say that.
Well, and something I've noticed too is there was something and by the way, I mean, we've been through a massive season of change in the last month, just in our family. My wife lost her grandfather. She's really, really close. And then 20 days later lost her uncle. And so it's just been just a brutal moment. And there's a family member that just is not responding to things that we should be responding to. And I realized I'm I'm expecting you to act like a friend of virtue, and you're not in that category. So that's on me.
Right.
That expectation, like I'm not angry at you. I'm actually angry at me that I thought you were something you're not.
Yeah. It's funny you say it that way because I was very frustrated with one of my family members. So I call up one of my mentors, which is Glenn Campbell, my spiritual kind of one of my gurus. And I and he knows me pretty well. We go back several decades. And I said, why am I so frustrated with this? He says, Mike, it's a lack of spiritual maturity. That cut to the quick, but he's right.
Yeah.
If I was mature, I would have, you used the term empathy earlier, Tony, but it is understanding that that person, that family member may not, one, have the capacity, or number two, they may have some other demons in their head or other issues that they're grappling with that they don't know how to deal with. And so it's so easy to be judgmental in a sense of, well, if it were me, I would do this. But it's getting closer to the problem. Why is this person that way? Now, we can't do this all times on every single situation that's out there. And you do need to realize you're going to screw up and make mistakes, and that's okay. But at the bare minimum, when somebody's not acting the way that you think that they should act, just realize there may be other circumstances as to why than the obvious.
Right. No.
Well, I know we're kind of coming up on time. I did want to throw one more question out to the group. So we've talked about Ansel, and kind of the origin of Ansel, Mike's role in it, right? Kind of mentoring all of us. Let's talk about the future of Ansel. I'd like just kind of throwing this out there to the group. And Charlie, feel free to weigh in. I mean, you obviously have worked with us, but have now an outside looking in perspective. But what are all your thoughts on what is the future of Ansel? And like, what is the potential? What do you think it actually might really look like? What are your thoughts? Blank slate.
I'll take a stab at that. As I'd said earlier, the next 5 years are gonna be, I think it's gonna radically change the industry. And I'm not saying that just to scare people. I think when AI first came out, we thought it was going to be a lot of a lot of blue collar jobs, a lot of people aren't going to the steel mill anymore. And come to find out, it's actually going to decimate a lot of white collar jobs, and it's going to decimate a lot of creativity jobs, and we're already seeing that. There's a story of Tyler Perry, big film creator. I mean, he shut his studio down. Like he was in the process of building like a $700 million studio. And he saw what the video generation capabilities, how they've improved over the last 12 months. And he stopped. He's like, I see where this is going. And, it's like, how do we apply that monster, that behemoth, this thing that's coming? How do we do that to change for the positive, the insurance, the finance community, to make a better customer experience and to get people to focus on doing it gets back to something we talked about 20 years ago. $8 an hour work, $10 an hour work, and $12 an hour work. I think inflation's changed those numbers, but um, how do we get automation to automate and AI to automate the $8 an hour work, the lower end stuff, so you can focus on the higher end stuff? I mean, anybody that's in insurance is listening. I think everybody would agree you shouldn't waste time selling renters policies. It's like $11 commission. You know, that's a perfect example for automation to take over. But as this thing gets smarter and smarter, all of a sudden, is it doing all the dwelling fires? Is it doing a lot of personal lines, things that don't lend itself to a concierge model, or things that aren't value add, where people just see it as a commodity? Is there a model there to where AI and automation can take over? Um, and how do we use this thing for good? Because we know there's going to be bad actors out there that are going to use it for you know maybe they don't have that famine mindset, to where it's hey, for me to win, everybody's got to lose. And really, I mean, focus on, and this is my recommendation for books, which we'll get into here in a little bit, but I want businesses to be empowered to make better data driven decisions, because I think for the longest time, going with your gut, which a CEO has to do, is a lot easier to do when there's data to back it up as well. And I think the insurance industry is turned into a data industry. And how do we get access to that? How do we get access to that data with better analytics, better projections of where the business is going, better predictions, and just get better at doing the business as a whole? Um, because like I said earlier, I don't think the regular agent, the agent that's been doing this for 20 years, I don't think they're fully using their technology stack to their best ability.
No, definitely not. I mean, we see this firsthand, right? So it's only going to get worse, right? As AI gets rolled out more and more, right? I mean, there'll be 5 Ferraris in the garage that you're paying for, right?
Right.
You're not taking any of them out.
Yeah. I mean, I think with that, Ansel has compared to some of my past experiences, has a more well-defined niche, and that's not just to say, um, just an industry niche or a tool or technology stack niche or something like that, but really, a combination of that. Uh, when the right type of people, the right type of team is put together, you have a real, something special that, as I mentioned, Garrett and have been a part of several companies before, and the whole team just never felt like it was there, and I feel like we have that. So as far as the future of Ansel, what I'm seeing is that we have an openness collectively to listen and respond to the industry in a way that is unfamiliar to me in a good way. Like, I haven't had that experience working with others to this degree, and I think that the future of Ansel will be informed by our ability to remain humble and have a humility in our assumptions, and just to keep our antennas up and respond to these things like you're bringing up, AI, people's the data and analytics being able to inform the people who are doing the work, empowering people to in a better way, that doesn't just necessarily you know um, eliminate jobs or eliminate functions, but it more so empowers people who are doing the important work.
Well, what do you see the future, Garrett?
Yeah, I mean, I think it sort of builds on, your comments, Leif and Tony. The thing that I'm really getting excited about is, I mean, sure, we've got these amazing tools and AIs. I agree with you, Leif. It's a game changer. Like, the only thing I can compare it to in our lifetime is the .com, right? Boom of the .com in the mid '90s, late '90s, and how that's transformed everything since. Like, I think there's a great opportunity to sort of meld subject matter experts in the insurance space, like someone like Mike with like 4+ years of experience, right? Or or you, Leif, and many others, right? We can go on and on with the technology, and then see where the gaps are, and then go out and find other partners in the industry. So you guys know one of the things right now that we're early talks is about possibly doing a joint venture, right, with another vendor that very much supplements the things that we don't have, and vice versa. We supplement the things that they're not strong in. And I think the AI, sort of big bang, if you will, right? That's gonna, I think, the all the puzzle pieces in the Lego kit are now thrown on the floor, and I think we can all be really creative with how we assemble them, like in new ways and new shapes and so forth that weren't previously possible. And I mean, Salesforce is already starting to make that happen, right? I mean, you've got these groups like Varuna and so forth that are growing fast. But in talking with Varuna's C-level folks, like, they know some of the bottlenecks they have. They just don't have service providers to go meet those bottlenecks, and they don't have enough people to sort of dam all those dikes, right? So
Right.
to me, that's the exciting thing. Is I think there's going to be some really interesting kind of ways that people collaborate in the next 5 to 10 years, and we will be very opportunistic. And back to Mike's precepts, like, it's gotta meet the 4 precepts.
Yeah, and the thing with the joint venture is, there's people we can bring along with us that have similar mindsets but different skill sets, and we can collaborate. And maybe it's a thing to where we're not taking as big of a piece of the pie on some of these things because we're not doing it all ourselves, but we may be first to market on several things, several initiatives, for sure.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
used to tell people that I'd rather have 5% of Coca-Cola than 100% of this company any day of the week.
Absolutely.
And there's obvious reasons for that. I think it would depend on how to answer the question, the future for Ansel. There is a lot of different ways. When if you recall, Garrett, when we were talking and you were so frustrated with working in the company that you wanted to quit, and you said you quit twice, and so I said, let's unpack this and figure out where are we going. What is the real issue here? And that's where the concept came from, to create a different business. So that's the legacy. And I told you, this is Leif, this is your opportunity, Tony. It's this is your company. That's why I said I do not want to go through succession ever again. So if you were to ask me the future of Ansel, well, the future of Ansel is it's the opportunity for you 3 guys to create your legacy, to do what I've done, but in current models and current times with AI, which didn't exist before. And I get a kick out of hearing the game changer. I have to really think about how many times have I heard that term over 45 years. It's not a game changer. It's the next iteration.
Yeah.
So you better be prepared for it. And what happens to a lot of people, like Blockbuster, they didn't want to go to streaming, and they could have bought Netflix, and they didn't. So that was another one of the game changers. But I've seen a lot in my lifetime. I mean, if you talk to the old people, that like some of the 100-year-old people are out there, guys, they were around before there were really cars. I mean, so it's a game changer, and so I'm having fun with this for a second, but the point is, so then there's a legacy perspective of helping you guys achieve what I've had the joy between Heidi and I of achieving. Also, Ansel is free from a lot of the entrapments that a retail insurance agency has. So by breaking Ansel off from the technological arm, it's free to not only serve Coverica to the extent that Coverica needs it now or quits or whatever happens. There's always an opportunity to where what Ansel does can benefit a Coverica. So that's the second precept. But also other companies, and also everybody makes good money with it. I could answer it from the standpoint of, here's an opportunity for young people to be a part of something that is so different than the businesses that they, I listen to. I'm going to be a little obnoxious here for a second. But when COVID hit, I knew the farce that it was. You talk to anybody here that was here, I said, look, we're not shutting down. Yeah, we're going to take your temperature. And yeah, if you don't want to come to work because you're uncomfortable, that's fine. That's fine. But I'm coming because I studied pandemics, and you cannot stop a pandemic. Heidi actually had been through the Hong Kong flu. There was, anyway. So the point is that yes, you got to be smart about it. You got to be, and we didn't know, and nobody knew. And I'm not going to point fingers at the government and saying that they overreached, although I think that they did. But the point is that it was something that hadn't happened, and so we didn't know how to deal with it. In retrospect, what did we learn? We learned never leave the core values. Never leave where we were. And like that Alistair Cook quote where he talks about bouncing a baby on your knee. Never forget why you were made, why you exist. To love, to have relationships, and to be a part of something. To do good works. To get a sense of fulfillment from working. Everybody loves athletes. Everybody loves the gold medalists. These people work their ass off to get to where they are, but yet young people, to a large extent, think that you don't have to work that hard. That you hear older people talk about entitlement. Well, what have you taught them? What did you do as a parent? Did you let them suffer and fail, or were you a helicopter parent where, well, what do you mean you can't tell my son that he stinks? I'll sue you. Well, wait, what are you teaching your kid?
Yeah.
So what I see for the future of Ansel is to be another iteration of a modern company that can still teach the core values of why business matters to God and what still needs to be worked on. Because guess what? Until the end times come or we die, there's always going to be an opportunity to change and modify and be better at what we're doing. So you in Ansel don't have all of the same entrapments that an established company has, like Coverica, that's 40 years old. So Coverica needs to become more concierge in its model. That's for it to continue to survive. But it will absolutely need a company like Ansel to give it the technological advantages, as well as other agencies. So I see a very bright future. Then if you were to say, well, what are the killers? Well, the killers will be if we become more focused internally, and we're thinking more about, well, if I did this, I could make more money, because those are the things that distract people. And continue to think, okay, let's follow these precepts, because not only will we do well financially, but we'll sleep well at night. You don't want to be the person that makes a lot of money and you have no friends.
No. Yeah, and to that point too is I want to see this industry advance. And I've been so frustrated for 20 years going to conferences, and I'm like, guys, we're 10, 15 years behind. And we're not on the forefront of this. And there could be a big disruptor that takes out the entire independent channel.
Or change it.
Or change it significantly. And so I think we're in a great position. We're in a great position to do good work. I love waking up every morning. I'm usually working within 10 minutes of getting out of bed, because it's like I'm excited.
Yes. That's the cool thing about it. And I remember years ago I was at they used to call them e-symposiums. It was all introducing the internet concepts to insurance people. So e-insurance, this is very, very beginning stages. And a woman was talking about, she says, let me tell you what the game is. You have the carriers that pay the claims, and you have the consumer that buy it. And technology is trying to displace all the people in between those two extremes. So to the extent that the agency principals understand that is the goal, to have the people paying the claims and the people that are buying the insurance. Well, that brings in the capacity issue. So what I look at is technology with data. Can we get the information so we can create our own insurance company? I mean, these are offshoots that technology allows. So it's not when I hear the fatalistic disruptor. I mean, Bill Gates said that travel agents would be no more. One more time where it's like the pandemic. Would you just stop? Bill, you may be smart on a lot of things, but what did happen? Travel agents now are going for the experience when you travel. So Gary Saunders, who we sent him and his wife on a trip, he's kind of pseudo-retiring at 73, and we put him in touch with our travel agent. Okay, they're not just saving me money on air flights. They're saying, okay, here is the trains. Do this. Go first class on this train. Don't go.
It's concierge.
It's a concierge experience.
Yeah.
And so it was a disruptor if you're one of the travel agents that all you did was help people get cheaper air flights. But to the extent that they graduated to where it's the experience of traveling. Because I will tell you, when we want to travel and go do something, it's a nightmare because of technology. I mean, looking at VRBO, they only give you so much information, and you want to know this, so I'll call up people, what about this area? So now I'm back into the travel agent stuff because I don't know. And the technology that you get from a VRBO is not going to give you the information you really want because that works against them. They want to make certain they're capturing money from you.
Right.
Okay, Heidi says, well, what is their cancellation? Because sometimes that's hidden. Well, when will they? So technology, although it's a no-brainer, we need to use it and harness it for our best interests. We also need to appreciate the fact that there's more ways to hide. There's more disinformation. There's more manipulation, which, then you say, oh, wait a minute. I mean, like the not to get into politics, but I gotta wonder how much of what we're told is real. Do we have the capacity to really know what's real? This goes back to what I would tell people in lawsuits that we've had over the years. Unless you saw it with your own two eyes, the answer is, I don't know. Stop projecting. Did you see this with your own eyes? Yes or no? Well, I saw the person walk in the room, and then I saw her walk out of the room, and the person was dead that's in the room, so he had to have done it. Well, but you didn't see that happen because you can be surprised. So with technology, it's going to make life, like you said, the jobs that people don't want to do, clearly filling out Accord apps and all that other stuff, that needs to go away. But at what point is there value by having a person involved in it? So the future for Ansel will be marrying those two. And as long as I'm, still healthy, I'll be that I don't want to say Eeyore, but I'll be that person saying, wait a minute, is this really going to help me as a business owner do more of what I want?
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, Tony, your point about, and I can say from my own personal experience, like we've got a really strong team. And so it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, I think that about wraps up our discussion. As our faithful listeners know, we usually like to do recommendations at the end. And these are things that, we've come across recently. They might benefit you professionally. Personally, it might be something that you enjoy, but we like to throw things out there that we've recently enjoyed. So, Leif, usually you have 5 or 10 things you want to recommend. Maybe we'll get a 1 or 2 today. What do you got?
No, today's just 2.
Today, right.
So yeah, there's a book that I'm just wrapping up. It is easily digestible, but I've got to warn you, it's an expensive book. I think the book was $100. And so anyway, it's called A Practitioner's Guide to Business Analytics, Using Data Analysis Tools to Improve Your Organization's Decision-Making and Strategy. The author is Randy Bartlett. And it's very digestible. I mean, the guy's a PhD, he's brilliant, but it's something that's very approachable. And it gets back to that thing that I was saying earlier of it's data-driven decision. It's go with your gut, but back it up with data. And then also let data guide you to maybe things that you've missed or areas of the business that you've missed. And then as a personal one, I've said this on previous episodes, I love listening to music while I work. It helps me just have almost a soundtrack to the work. And so what actually I've been playing with lately is there's a record, the album, the Allman Brothers Band live at Fillmore East.
That's a good one. Yeah.
Yep.
Classic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, so that's been playing on in the background while I'm working. So
Yeah. And Charlie, you know the Allman Brothers, right?
I don't actually.
Oh.
Be dating myself right now. What is
It's
this?
okay. It's all right. This is a game Charlie and I play, so that's why I
Yeah.
put him on the spot. I like to ask him movies from the 80s and 70s that he's seen, and yeah. Anyway,
Yeah,
sorry,
I
Charlie.
get
I didn't
it.
mean it. You'll like
No,
it.
Well,
you're
yeah,
good.
yeah. I'm
You'll
only
like it.
50 years older than him, so not much has happened in the last 50 years, right?
Right.
How about you, Tony?
Yeah, no, I think obviously I'm
Other
gonna
than the
go-
mandolin you just got.
Yeah. Other than that, that's true. I'm gonna go with a music one. Blake Mills is he's a musician that he's honestly I think I admire him most as far as the new generation of guitarists, songwriters. The guy, he's brilliant, and he's really a triple threat kind of guy. Incredible guitarist, incredible songwriter, and he's a great producer. And I've been getting into recognizing that side of musicians a lot. The production, as we're talking about finding the end outcome and assembling the right people to get on the album and like work together to build the track the way that they envision it. It's amazing. And then the other one is I think some of I'm a tennis nut. So Wimbledon is going on right now, one of the major tournaments in tennis, and it's anytime one of these is going on, I always got something in the corner. I'm like, oh, what's going on with this? But tennis, it's one of those sports where you get to watch somebody approach and overcome challenges, and you see their psychological game changing, you see the physical game changing, and you see the way that they can get through these various stages of a match, and it's a great watch if you get into it. So Wimbledon right now, that's go ahead and get it.
All right, Charlie, what do you got for us?
Yeah. Actually, on that game that Garrett and I play, I get a lot of good recommendations from him, so it's always been fun playing that one. My rec for this episode is a YouTube video. It's called "Life is Not a Hero's Journey." It's about an hour and a half, and it goes into this idea of, if you watch a lot of movies or read a lot of stories, or Joseph Campbell's monomyth, right? The 12-step hero's journey. Like, but you think about your own life, life's not always like that, right? You don't really know where in that circle you are. Not everything ends super well. Sometimes it ends in a tragedy. And yet, all of our stories that we look at in history, right? I know you do a lot of war stories, a lot of Winston Churchill, right? I mean, he follows a hero's journey himself. So how does that work out? Why is it that we live these lives that sometimes don't have meaning, and yet all of our stories in our collective subconscious follow this monomyth? Really good video. It's about an hour and a half. A lot of good pop culture references, but it really opened up my eyes and made me change the way I see the world and my place in it. So that's been a recent one. Definitely helped me turn a new leaf, honestly. So, yeah,
Very
check that
cool.
out.
Well, I'll go next, and then give Mike the final recommendation. So I realize a lot of us are going to the beach sometime, probably the next month or two. I'm going to give everyone a light read. So I'm a big fan of like the Maltese Falcon, Chinatown, those kinds of movies. And really the origin story behind a lot of those is author Raymond Chandler. So recently I read Farewell, My Lovely, which is one of his kind of shorter novellas, and really enjoyed it. So it's about Philip Marlowe and how he navigates the underbelly of Los Angeles in the 1920s, and he usually gets the femme fatale and all these sort of noir stories. So if you're looking for some kind of a light read, a whodunit, that's my beach recommendation.
Well, of course, between the traveling back and forth and remodeling and all that, I haven't had a lot of free time to do a lot. But there are a couple things. Heidi read a book. I think it's called A Paris Wife, and it's a historical fiction about Hemingway. And I'm kind of a Hemingway fan. Of course, the guy ends up killing himself, but he was a strange dude, and so I was interested in reading about him, and so I got about halfway through the book and says I can't do this anymore because it's definitely it's definitely the gender difference.
Right.
I mean, it's written by a woman who's talking about the romantic aspect of being married to. It was the first wife of him, but there's the historical fiction aspect of it, so I was learning a lot about it. But what it did teach me was how different. And I said to Heidi, I said, you are this Paris wife. I mean, that's why you like this book, is because she would do anything she could to help him. And so that was a real insight for me to deal with her. But I'm more like I guess I would rather have just a historical fiction where it's kind of cool, where it's talking about the guys and do it, but not so much the touchy-feely aspect of it. So I'm admitting that about myself. But so I read halfway through that book. Then I reread a book that I'd read years ago about kings and priests. And it's basically a criticism of the fact that if you go back in the Old Testament, there were 12 tribes, okay? And only one tribe was the Levites, which was the priests. And the job of the other 11 kings was for the provisions of that. And so that it takes me to where we are today, which is there is such a chasm between churches and business owners, which is a mistake. They should the priests or pastors or whatever should be supporting business in any way they can, because that's where their provisions are going to come from. So that was kind of another interesting read. And then lastly, I've got a new Baldacci. Baldacci, this guy's brilliant. I'm reading another book of his. I just started on it. I'm consuming it. But the main character is Divine. His name's Divine. And this is a military guy that had to leave the military because one real bad guy killed another bad guy, and then the bad guy ends up dying, and he did nothing to help him. And so, it's mind candy. But Baldacci is an incredible author. So if you want to just get lost in reading something that's kind of cool, that's it. So anyway, those are the three. One is stay away from wife in Paris. The other one is Kings and Priests. It's kind of a cool concept. And then you have this Baldacci's. This is the book with Divine. And next time I come, I'll tell you what the name of the book is. But I just started reading it. Heidi, we were at the airport, and she says, "Here, have something to read." So I started reading Baldacci, and I got into it.
That's funny. And speaking of Hemingway, one of my favorite quotes is a Hemingway quote, which is, and just as anybody that's creative, is the first draft of everything is shit.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was a Hemingway thing. And as a creative, whether you write music or code or anything that's artistic, is you realize that the first draft is really just kind of it's the ideation. It's proof of concept at best. So.
And there's a guy who could care less about what anybody thinks.
Yeah. And then if you ever want to go down a rabbit hole, Google Hemingway cats. And
oh yeah, I was down. I visited in Key West.
Yeah,
there were a lot of cats.
They're also six-toed. They're six-toed cats.
Yeah,
they're called Hemingway cats.
Yeah.
And so it's just this weird. Anyway, there's some YouTube rabbit holes you can go down. So to our audience, we just want to thank you for listening to today's episode of What It Takes to Lead. New episodes drop every 3 weeks. And if you've got a question or a suggestion for us, just please drop us a line. You can reach us at podcast@coverica.com. That's COVERICA. Or via X at WITTLPOD. Finally, if you like the podcast, please subscribe and leave us a review. Until next time, thanks so much.